Okay. Want to welcome everybody tonight. Really excited. Here we are. It's almost Thanksgiving, and you're getting ready to learn some things you can apply to your Thanksgiving dinner this year. But we're really excited to have you. I'm John Ware. I direct the Center for the Environment here. And we have a great group here to teach us tonight things that I think are important, and I think all of you do too, or otherwise you wouldn't be here tonight. So let me introduce our speakers tonight. On the end, Dr. Nicole Magryta. Chris, raise your hand. Joined Salisbury Pediatrics in 1999. He has a special interest in pediatric allergies, asthma, autism, and immunology. He studied integrative medicine with Dr. Andrew Weil. Does everybody remember Andrew Weil on CNN? Yes, at the university, and that was at the University of Arizona School of Medicine. In addition to general pediatric care, Dr. Magritta provides specialized care in prevention, nutrition, and combines alternative medicine with traditional medicine. Next up, we've got Chris Nagy. Dr. Chris Nagy, he's a orthopedic surgeon of 25 years, but also someone who's passionate about real health. His goal is to educate those who want better for themselves beyond what modern medicine offers. Dr. Nagy received his MD from Wright State University School of Medicine to help people beyond the scope of orthopedics. He furthered his training as a fellow in the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. He has a certification in mastering hormone optimization with Dr. Neil Rouser. He also completed certification in age management medicine via the Synergenics Research Foundation. And then we have Nicole Magryta, is a clinical nutritionist with extensive experience in the field of childhood nutrition and functional medicine. She completed her clinical nutrition degree at the University of Virginia School of Health Sciences and went on to complete a health coach certification from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition in New York City. She currently works at Salisbury Pediatrics as a clinical nutritionist, as well as seeing clients in a private practice. She works closely with many schools teaching nutrition science to middle and high school students, as well as establishing wellness programs for those institutions. Her passion is for changing the face of childhood health. Her years of training and study are culminating in a soon-to-be published book called Nourish Your Tribe. Her goal is to help parents navigate our toxic food environment and raise children with a healthy palate. So let's hear it for Chris, and Nicole. Start one thing. Now, you have some note cards. You're going to have a lot of questions, and so what we're going to do is have you write your questions out. Kathy, raise your hand, is going to collect those. And when do you want them to start? Whenever they want to. I mean, they can go on at any time as we're moving ahead. So you just, when you get a card ready, do you want them to pass it down or hold it up? Right. Yeah. But anyway. Okay, so here we go. Let's take it from here.
Good evening. Thanks, everyone, for coming. For a show of hands, how many people came to the lecture 2 weeks ago? Oh, a lot. Wow. All right, so we won't have to repeat any of those questions. Great. Second show of hands, how many people came to this show last spring? Okay, so a couple of you are going to see some repeats. Hopefully that will encourage you to now become proficient at doing these things. We're grateful that you're all here. We often, as we said at the last lecture, we feel like we're preaching to the choir a lot of times, and that's not a bad thing if the choir becomes disciples of moving this movement out to other people who can become healthier. So we really appreciate your time, and we're going to sit here and cook all kinds of fun things for you. And this time, we actually have the luxury of Dr. Ware has got us a GoPro. It's functionally terrible. And, and when it starts working, if it...
Yes, he worked very hard.
But, it's an attempt to step forward.
Yeah, we're getting there. So we're going to try and show up top so you can see what it looks like when things are cooking. But tonight we're going to make a few different things. Chris, what are you going to make?
Well, first off, welcome everybody. And for the people that were at our previous lecture and came back, wow, good. Appreciate it. We thought maybe we would have overwhelmed you and scared you away. But we appreciate you coming back tonight. And this will be relatively informal. And most of my cooking is not going to be cooking. It's going to be fermentation, which is the traditional way of preserving food before we had refrigeration. And it's something that we've gotten away from in our culture today. But it's so important, really, for your health because the fermentation process is how you nourish your microbiome. You feed yourself the good bacteria that keep you healthy so they can outbattle the bad bacteria that make you sick, basically. As we talked in our previous talk, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, says the gut is... Okay, just slipped my mind.
Let medicine be thy food, let food be thy medicine.
Yeah. So, the gut is basically the gateway to health and disease. Health or disease, and it's your choice. And unfortunately, in America today, with a lot of the toxic exposures we have, the food, the environment, stress, everything, our microbiomes are becoming weaker and weaker. We're developing more autoimmune diseases. So basically, before I spend the next hour talking, I'm going to make kombucha, which is fermented sweet tea, traditional beverage, kefir, which is basically fermented milk, or you could think of it as rotten milk, but that doesn't sound right. So it's fermented milk, which is extremely rich in probiotics, about 5 to 7 times more amount of probiotics than what you get in regular yogurt, and so easy to make. And then the other thing I'll be making is sauerkraut. There's many variations on sauerkraut. You can make kimchi if you pour red pepper in it, or depending on the different vegetables that you use. So all of these are kind of part of my daily routine. And actually, it's not drudgery. A lot of times when you smell fermented vegetables, you're like, I don't know if I want to eat that. And a lot of times fermented vegetables, kefir, sauerkraut, it's an acquired taste. I mean, they call kefir the champagne of milk. And I know you look at that and think, geez, what's all that stuff on the side? All that stuff on the sides is what's called kefiran, which is a polysaccharide that helps heal your gut, basically. It fills in the holes and the pock marks that the toxic food you're eating have created. So I'm going to be working a little bit, cutting up my vegetables for the sauerkraut, but as Chris and Nicole kind of show their thing, I'll get to mine and show you exactly how to make all this stuff, which is easy. I'm telling you, this is one of the easiest things to do. The sauerkraut, I probably make it every 2 or 3 months, and it'll last quite a while. The kefir I make every day. I make a quart a day. Kombucha, basically that takes once every 7 to 10 days is how you make the kombucha, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So,
great. Am I on? Okay. And I'm gonna everything we're basically making today is really easy and straightforward. I'm going to show you how to make bone broth with turkey since we're approaching Thanksgiving. I know everyone here is going to have a turkey bones left over, so I'm going to teach you sort of what to do with those bones and how to make an extremely nourishing broth from those bones. I'm also brought a little concoction of a drink I drink in the morning that's it's a wonderful anti-inflammatory alternative to coffee. If you want to try, I actually have some sample cups that if any brave souls will try it, they can. And Chris, you're going to make ghee. Again, all these are very traditional foods that have been around for hundreds of years. You can go on and talk about your ghee.
No, good. I'm not the chef, obviously. And so I'm just going to do the simple stuff. I'm going to teach you all how to make ghee, which is basically taking butter and converting it into a healthy source for your gut microbiome. And I'm a huge fan. If anyone knows me, there's a few things in life I'm really passionate about. One of them is your gut. Other things are sports, and other things are, her. But aside from those 3 things, what we're going to talk about is how to take the bad protein out of this butter if you were irritated by it. Now, as Chris said earlier, he loves kefir every day. If I drank kefir every day, I'd be in trouble because I have a sensitivity to dairy. But it just depends on what your body is capable of handling. Now, fermented foods tend to have less of the irritating things in them through the fermentation process. Things get broken down and become healthier for you. So in the process of taking this and converting it to ghee, we're going to remove casein. And I don't know if anyone knows what casein is. Casein is the number 1 irritating protein in dairy for most humans. Now, children, I'm a pediatrician, obviously, I see lots of babies. In the first 4 weeks of life, we see lots of babies show up with what's called cow milk protein intolerance. It's not cow allergy. They do not have signs of anaphylaxis or signs of things you connotate with food allergies. What they do is they show up, they're colicky, they have green poops, which is just fast transit time, so bile doesn't get changed into its brown form. They have eczema all over their skin, they throw up a lot, and they come to the pediatrician. Well, when I first started medicine 16 years ago in Salisbury, I used to just go, sorry, Mom, your kid has colic, it'll be fine, it'll go away, which it does eventually. The sad thing is all that bad advice I was giving was really, truly casein intolerance. And so by removing the casein protein from the milk, from the butter, it can be now tolerated because it's primarily whey at that point. Unless you're reacting to whey, you'll be fine with this. And this is primarily what we use in our house as our butter source because my gut doesn't like it and her gut doesn't like it a little bit. And the other my kids who also do this, they get irritated by it a little bit too. So I'm going to start making.
Good.
And
Want me to help?
he's going to start cutting.
Yep.
And you can talk.
I'll just watch. You can talk. Oh.
Yes.
Well,
the camera's working now.
Let me put it over. It's meant to show the pot, correct?
Yep. From the top.
From the top.
Well, I can do my little kefir while he's doing that if you want.
Go ahead. Do the kefir
Yeah, go
while
for
I
it.
get
All
started.
right, I'll do the kefir here. I'm going to get the kombucha out of the way for a minute.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I'm putting it on him.
All right, so kefir, fermented milk. I generally recommend you use whole milk, organic milk, raw milk if you can get it, but that's illegal in North Carolina, so you got to go to South Carolina to get it legally.
With your fireworks.
What's that?
There we
With
go.
your fireworks.
Or you can use pet milk,
Whoa.
which is really just raw milk, but they call it pet milk, so they don't have to get in trouble for selling it as raw milk. So anyways, but I generally use just organic whole milk. We talked a little bit about last week, whole milk, skim milk. Which one should you use? Absolutely use whole milk. Skim milk is sugar water.
Why?
They take the fat out of skim milk, basically. And what happens when you take the fat out of a food, it's all carbohydrates. When you eat all carbohydrates, your insulin levels go through the roof. And they've actually done studies looking at people who drink whole milk, people who drink skim milk, and people who drink whole milk actually are healthier, have less incidence of heart attack, diabetes. And, some of these are what are called observational studies where they look at one factor and another. They haven't done a randomized prospective double-blind controlled study. But in general, the way I like to think about what I do for my health is basically copy nature. What cows produce skim milk?
Skinny cows?
None. Yeah. Sickly cow. Well, skim milk was initially used to fatten pigs. I think I mentioned that last time, but eventually they figured out, hey, let's sell it to people. So truly, that is the case. I actually posted a little thing on my Facebook page about that this week. So whole milk has healthy fats. There are some, both Chris and Nicole and I are all proponents of healthy fat. We've lived under the mantra forever of don't eat fat, fat makes you fat, when that's not actually true. Basically, in your life, you burn what you eat. If you're eating all carbs, then you're burning carbs, and you can never lose fat. But if you eat fat and teach your body how to be a fat burner by having to metabolize fat, then you eventually become a fat burner. And then if you eat fat, you stay fuller longer. So whole milk on the kefir. So basically, I tried to time this perfectly so that this would be mature for when I was going to do my little presentation. And it's about there. Kefir is made with what are called kefir grains. And they're not really grains like wheat, but they look more like cottage cheese. And what you do is you put the...
Where do you get your grains, Chris?
Well, the grains never die. The grains come from the Caucasus region of Afghanistan. And so I got my grains from a friend. And the grains grow with each batch of kefir you make. So, and as they continue to grow, the more grains you have, the quicker it ferments, basically. So when I get too many grains, I basically feed them to the dogs, put them in my smoothie, or give them to a friend, because I eat the grains. The grains are what are called a SCOBY. SCOBY meaning symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. And, again, bacteria, I don't want any bacteria. Bacteria is what causes disease. Well, no, not really. Bacteria does cause disease, but that's bad bacteria. In your gut, 70% of your immune system's in your gut, and you have 3 to 5 pounds of bacteria lining your gut, and the trick is to have about 85% good bacteria, 15% bad. So the more good bacteria that you have, the stronger your immune system, the better you're able to fight off disease. And so the kefir grains, basically, I got from a friend a couple years ago, and they never die as long as you feed them.
But for those of us who don't have friends with kefir grains, maybe how about the box that you'd get in the store? How do you feel about that?
Oh, the commercial kefir?
Yeah, like they're just the box you can buy of kefir grains.
No, the grains.
The grains. No, the grains that you buy in the box that
yeah.
you can start brewing.
Like the powdered or the real actual, like there's powdered kefir grains. There's called Yo Gourmet Kefir Starter. It's a powder. It can make 1 or 2 batches of kefir and then done. But if you get some kefir grains, they'll last forever. So, or else we talked a little bit about last week, culturesforhealth.com. You get kefir grains from there. Kefir grains are all pretty much similar, and they have a diverse array of bacteria. The interesting thing is, we buy probiotics, pills to help nourish our gut, 5 billion, 10 billion. 1 cc of kefir, 1 cc, has about 10 billion colony-forming units of bacteria. So 1 teaspoon has about 50 billion colonies. So imagine like drinking a quart a day of bacteria that has. So kefir is actually a cheaper way to do probiotics rather than spending $50 buying a bottle of 20 or 30 probiotics.
And there was a famous guy who drank kefir every day of his life until he died, Eli Metchnikoff.
Yeah.
Won the Nobel Prize back in the 1800s, and I think it was Bulgaria. He figured out that certain blood cells, we call them white blood cells, engulf pathogens, viruses, bacteria, to kill them and then teach our immune system to get right from wrong. And during his entire life, he figured out that Bulgarians were living longer, and he made the assumption that it was because they were drinking what he called spoiled milk.
Yeah.
And he won the Nobel Prize for this learning of the macrophages, and then he went on to be the first champion of what we call now kefir probiotics.
So kefir, it's pretty much fermented. It's done. Sometimes it separates into curds and whey, liquid, and then all the curds. And basically, just an immersion blender, $12. I've had this 5 years, basically. I just kind of mix it all up. And it's basically a drinkable yogurt. And you can flavor it with different things. You can blend it up in a blender, put some fruit in it, do whatever you want. I often mix it with a little bit of Greek God's honey yogurt because I like just the way it tastes that way. So basically, you mix it up quickly, easily, and then you pour it through a strainer. And that separates the kefir from the grains. And, of course, I forgot my spatula that I usually... And then you take a spatula and kind of run it through so that the kefir separates well from the milk itself. And again, this really takes all about 5 minutes a day. Simple thing to do. And so I leave it on you leave it on your counter. I put a little coffee filter on top of it because, flies and bugs like fermented foods. So I throw a little coffee filter over it and then just put the ring from the mason jar. And basically, another point I wanted to share with you, there's no way you can be a foodie without using mason jars. So you better learn to like mason jars if you're thinking about becoming a foodie. So anyways, you just you can see it dripping through there. These are the kefir grains here. That's not working. So,
we lost our picture.
So what I have now in here is kefir. And now I have the kefir grains.
So you let it sit on the counter for 24 hours
well,
or so,
in all honesty,
and let it grow?
In all honesty, with the volume of kefir grains I have, I took this out this morning. So,
Okay.
It depends on the volume of kefir grains you have, but 24 hours, less in the summertime, more in the wintertime.
And then when it's done, you put it in the refrigerator.
When it's done, I pour it all in this jar, and I keep this in the fridge. You don't really necessarily want to drink warm kefir. I don't, at least.
Now,
yeah.
oh, perfect. Oh, no. Just tell. Yeah.
So for those who can see right now, my Kerrygold grass-fed lovely butter is now slightly boiled. The key with butter is just like all fats, don't heat them too hot, or you start to make them turn into something we don't like. And basically, in the world of inflammation, it's. I'm not Italian, I'm Polish, but I married an Italian. So my veins started going when I got married. started it on about medium high, and now I'm down to low. And what I want to get to is where it just percolates like this for a while. And the key is if you start to see any hint of orange, you're starting to go too high. And so what's happening right now is that heat is precipitating out the casein. The casein protein is now sticking to each other, and they're going to turn into little mini grains. And we're going to eventually take out what will be left over as well. All right, you're back.
Yeah.
So those are my kefir grains. I pour them through the filter, and actually it's better to use plastic. Kefir doesn't necessarily like metal, but it's not going to kill them. So just pour them through a strainer. The kefir grains come out, and you can see I have like old remnants of kefir in this jar. I just use it over and over, and then just fill it up, back up with some just milk. Now, if you use the Yo Gourmet kefir starter, which is a powdered starter, you actually have to scald your milk to kill any bacteria, so that the Yo Gourmet kefir starter will work. With kefir grains, you don't got to do anything with the milk except pour it in, 1 or 2 little turns, mix it up.
So see the yellow foam that's happening?
Their heads are going.
We're going to keep doing this. The yellow foam that's right there, that's some of the protein precipitating out. And then underneath, in the bottom, there's another layer of protein precipitating out. So it comes in 2 spots.
So I throw this in the fridge overnight, basically, and I take it out each morning and set it on the counter. And by 8 or 9 at night, I have my kefir. So that's one of my bedtime rituals, I guess. I strain my kefir off, pour it into my little glass jar here, and then the following morning I'll take it back out again. So it just ferments, and it's, again, they call it the champagne of milk. And it does taste a little bit like sour milk. That's why it's better to have it cold. But if you put a little bit of yogurt then in the kefir, or any fruits that you may like. You could even maybe use honey if you want. But I'll just, again, I said, last week I told you commercial yogurt's basically garbage.
Sugar.
Sugar, yeah. But still, you find ways to make this stuff work. I mean, I could probably just eat the straight-up kefir, but if I want my family to have a little bit or at least try it, it's got to be semi-palatable. But they call kefir the champagne of milk because it does have a little bit of a tang to it. And that tang gets more tangy the longer you let it sit, basically. So that's pretty much how you make kefir. It's quite easy. It's a matter of pouring milk in a bottle.
So you're mixing all that in, and then you portion it out for your family like that.
Well, I mix it in there. Once again, I use my little handy dandy immersion blender. They make much nicer ones now, but and I just mix it up to mix the yogurt in. To mix the yogurt in with the. I do pretty well without making a mess of myself when I do this too. So I stir it all in. Again, that's Greek God's honey yogurt. You can use any yogurt you want. Mix it all in. And
Polish God's honey yogurt's a little better.
Polish God's, yeah. And then I just pour it in my. And did you hear that little burp there when I pulled the lid off? That's fermentation. Fermentation creates gas. That's why you don't put the full lid on the kefir container or on the kombucha container.
I'm cutting you off.
Cut me off.
So
there you go. That's kefir done.
If you look over here, I'm still at about the same temperature. But what's happening now is it's just starting to crackle. It's not violently bubbling anymore, and it's slowing down. And when it starts to slow down like that, when it gets to just a little popcorn crackle, that's when you're almost finished. And so that's when you know you've precipitated out most of the goodies.
Okay.
So you can even hear it now.
Yeah.
It's intermittent. I mean, I wish you all could come up.
And it's at this point when I would take the spoon and you can actually start skimming off the top layer of foam. It looks like foam. Yeah. The casein actually rises to the top and the bottom. And after you skim off the top.
Casein? C-A-S-E-I-N. You know the nursery rhyme, don't eat your curds and whey, or eat your curds and whey, whatever. I think it was, I heard don't eat. They all said eat. Curds is the casein, whey is what's left over.
Yeah.
Whey is much less irritating. That's why a lot of the sports bodybuilding powders are made of whey protein.
So the top foam, you skim it off, put it in a jar, and then what you'll notice within 5 or 10 minutes, this will go completely translucent, and you actually can look down at the bottom in about 10 minutes, and you'll see there's little brown particles. That's more of the casein and it sticks to the bottom of the pan, and that's when you know you're ready. Once it turns to sort of a golden color, to strain it.
And The amazing thing about ghee is something called butyrate, and it's a fatty acid, what's called a short chain fatty acid, which is a direct food source to your gut cells. Your gut cells are, line. If you take your intestines and stretch them out, they'll cover an entire doubles tennis court. Just you. I mean, that's how much absorptive surface area there is. And those cells turn over roughly every 3 days, and they need certain things to be happy and heal. And one of them is butyrate. And there's a great source of these short chain fatty acids in ghee.
Okay. Can I start my bone broth?
One more thing about.
Oh,
on
I'm
the
sorry.
kefir.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you might be thinking, geez, he's going to let that milk sit on the counter. It's going to go rotten. It's already rotten. Fermented food was how they preserved food in the past so that they could still consume it. So, I'm going to drink all this. I'm not going to go home, geez, that got warm. I hope it's not contaminated with some bad bacteria. It's going to make me sick. It's already fermented. So it is always, I say rotten jokingly. So, like the milk I have sitting back here is left over, that's probably going to be awful. That doesn't have a culture to ferment.
How much do you drink a day of that?
I probably drink about a quart a day. That's about 5 to 7 trillion colony-forming units of bacteria.
Wow.
I added it up because I'm a geek with a calculator.
Yeah.
But, 5 to 7 trillion. And so I drink a cup in the morning with my breakfast. I drink it with my dinner because fermented food helps you digest your food. Mm-hmm. The bacteria in there are hungry too, and so they'll eat and help digest the food that you're also consuming. So I drink probably
point of reference, what doses are they now using for Crohn's disease?
Of probiotics? I really don't even know.
1 to 3 trillion.
1 to 3 trillion.
Most people are getting 5 billion in their little probiotic they buy at the store.
Yeah.
You might as well be peeing in the wind. It's not going to help you much. I mean, the bottom line truly is you need a much higher volume of probiotic to do the job that needs to be done.
So 5 to 7 trillion if you're drinking it's quite a bit. A lot cheaper.
That's a lot. Yeah. A lot cheaper, yeah. Okay. Can I talk about bone broth now?
Almost.
No.
It's just using probiotics is basically a way of trying to give back your gut what it's missing and what it needs. And the probiotics actually offer a source of healing. It is no way, shape, or form the answer to any disease. Even somebody with C. diff colitis overgrowth, you're not going to cure it with probiotics. What you're doing with probiotics is giving your body a chance to start healing itself with other things. You're going to have to do a multimodal.
But probiotics with a combination of a good diet absolutely is going to enormously benefit Crohn's disease.
So, for example, Crohn's, I don't know if we talked about it last time, but in Europe, a lot of Crohn's disease therapy in teenagers is to put them on an amino acid formula. You basically take them off all food, and that's as good as prednisone for acute remission of Crohn's disease. So what that basically tells you is, what's the main trigger for Crohn's? Food. Right? And if you go to a local gastroenterologist, most of them will tell you food has no bearing on your disease. It's absolutely crazy. If the Europeans can do that, why can't we? And the bottom line is we can. The problem is most people don't want to do it. So they'd rather take their Humira or Remicade or drug instead of going on a very strict diet to heal their disease. And so that's just the reality of it. So here's what's left of the top portion of the ghee. Okay, that's the casein protein that was skimmed off the top. And babe, can I ask you to hold that?
Sure. Oh boy. Why don't want me to do it?
Yeah.
Let me do it. You haven't skimmed it all.
Right. And there's versions.
Which is where ours sits.
There's one called a gut buster version where they actually add to the ghee when it sits out on the counter probiotics. They add manuka honey. They add a lot of these other things. They actually add extra virgin olive oil, first pressed, cold pressed, and make the ghee a gut butter, they call it at that point. It's healthy by itself, but you can even make it more healthy. And I actually have recipes. If anyone wants it, I can get it to the center, and you can put it up on the website. Or in a week, she'll have her website up. You can post it up on there.
Yeah, I'm going to post all these recipes on my website. Okay, good. Okay. It's actually, it's not done.
It's not done?
No. It needs to be more translucent. It's not, you can't see the bottom. You should be able to see the bottom, so I would keep it going.
I thought we were good.
No, we're not good yet. Okay, can I talk about turkey or bone broth?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, so we're all getting in the mood for Thanksgiving, and everyone's going to have some bones left over. And bone broth in general is extraordinarily nourishing, whether you're making it with turkey, which I'm going to example for you today, but it can be made with beef, lamb bones, chicken, turkey, and all of the above, pheasant, any animal for that matter. But the way I think of bone broth is you're taking everything that's good from the animal and extracting it from the bones, and you're making it into a simplified form so that then our bodies can re-assimilate that into our bodies and take what's good. And bone broth does a fantastic job at that. Now, last time I did this, I actually brought a raw chicken, and I was sort of grossed out that I was handling all that. So I didn't do that this time. So we're going to pretend. So let's pretend you've all had your Thanksgiving meal, and now you have this wonderful carcass. You put the carcass in along with, if you have the neck left over, even I'll say chicken feet. Chicken feet are fantastic source of collagen and gelatinous, which is what we're looking for in this broth. I've never used feet until about a month ago in my broth, and I'm doing all this reading about bone broth. And Sally Fallon she's got some fabulous books. This is a really good one if you all don't have it. It's called Nourishing Broth. She has another one called Nourishing Traditions. Oh, he's got it. Okay, here you go. Yeah, I know. Unbelievable information in this book about broth. Every kind of broth that you'd ever want to make in this. Great resource. Where was I? Okay, so bone broth. So once you put the carcass in here, as I said, I made broth for the first time with feet. I was really grossed out because I'd never done it before, and I don't know who's made bone broth before. Anybody? Okay. Anybody use feet? Okay. I didn't grow up seeing any of that. I didn't grow up on a farm. I wish I did, but I didn't. Actually went to the farmer's market, and that's the other thing. What makes good broth is really, determined on the quality of the ingredients that you buy. So I don't mess around when I'm making this. I want to make sure that the bones that I've gotten it from an animal that's as healthy as possible, pasture raised, hopefully grass fed if it's a cow, organic if you can. But I usually go to my farmer's market and I find farmers that can supply me with some good meat or bones. To do that, you can go to the grocery store and buy similar products, but I like the farmer's market for this purpose. So once you have the carcass and the necks and any other bones, the backs, if you're making chicken, all of that and above is good. The more bones, the better. You can combine different animals in here. I like just doing one at a time, like one turkey or just the chicken, but you can. In the book, there's a lot of different recipes for that. So once you have all that in there, and let me first say, there's many great things about bone broth. One is the collagen, as I mentioned. I think women think of collagen because as we age, we lose it, and we all produce less of it as we grow older. But when I think of collagen and replacing it, and are we deficient in it as we age? Well, I think yes. Whether you have if brittle hair or nails, whether you have aging skin, whether you have autoimmune disease, whether you have osteoporosis, osteoporosis, all those things are going to be helped with collagen. And you get it from the tendons, the ligaments, the collagen in the bones. Bone, it's in and of itself, is about 50% minerals. It's about 25% collagen and 25% water. So you're getting more collagen from the bones, as well as I said, minerals. And we're going to be adding apple cider vinegar to this. Only 2 tablespoons. You don't even taste it. But what the apple cider vinegar does is it help extract the minerals from the bones in the turkey. So this is actually, it's just an acid of any kind. You can use lemon juice as well. So it's so simple. You just throw the bones in there. You put filtered water over it just to cover the bones. If all of you didn't get this recipe, I printed out all the instructions. It should be in the back somewhere. So you fill it up with bones. The ratio is somewhere around 4 pounds of bones to 4 quarts of water, if you are an exact like to measure. But you can just cover the bones, and then you just start adding things. Now, if you want a broth that's more flavorful, you add a little bit of meat in it. Meat is what really gives it the flavor. If you want a more mild broth, the bones will do a good job. And the other things that are beneficial are bone marrow, for example, in beef and lamb. If you great immune boosting capabilities or properties, as well as great fat and cholesterol profiles. So, it depends. You can really adjust this broth to whatever your needs are. Let's say you have a thyroid issue and you want iodine to help with your thyroid function. I would make some fish stocks, particularly those with the heads, because that's going to give you more iodine in the broth. So you really can adjust this and tweak this to whatever your conditions are, whether you want more collagen or more minerals. So once you have the carcass in there, you fill it up with water, and it's just then, when I said that the bones are 50% minerals, there's calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, sulfur, all go in there. A lot of people, when they think of bones, they think of calcium, and you think, oh, it's going to be calcium rich. Surprisingly, bone broth is not that calcium rich. It does have some in it. The interesting thing is, though, that even though it's a really, really small proportion, the bioavailability of that calcium is readily absorbed, and it's because it's the package that it's in. If you take a calcium supplement, it's well known that it's very poorly absorbed supplements in general, right? The calcium. So we take these large doses, but they're not, you might only absorb 10% of what you're taking. But when you have it in this form, when I talk about this, I think of all of nutrition research. We like to hone in on that one molecule or that one ingredient or that one nutrient, like calcium, and they'll study the heck out of calcium, and they want to make broad conclusions based on that one nutrient. Well, that's not how it works. It works with the synergistic properties of all of the things that are going on here. And those in combination within themselves are what's going to provide you with all this health benefit. So how do you add more nutrition to this? You add vegetables. And, you don't have to. You can just make it with bones, and you can boil it and put it in your crock pot and let it sit there for 12 hours, and you're good. But I like to make it as nutritionally packed as I can. So once I have the bones in there, I'll simply cut my vegetables, celery. I leave all the tops on. This is all good stuff. Just wash it, cut it, and you can leave it fairly big. The smaller the surface area, the more nutrients you're going to extract, but you don't have to cut it up really small. All you do is throw them in there. The carrots, some people say to peel them because the skins taste bitter. I've never found that personally, but some books will tell you that. Put some carrots in. A whole onion, I keep the skin on. Skin has flavor. It gives it color. Throw that in as well. This isn't on there, but I put ginger. I like ginger in mine. Enormous anti-inflammatory properties in it. Give it a couple chops. Mm-hmm. Right, chicken feet. And it's hard to find. They don't sell chicken feet. I think if you go to maybe Asian stores, I read somewhere that all of our chicken feet get shipped to China because they make the most broth of any country in the world. So that's where our feet are going. That's why we don't have them here. Anyway, so pig's feet, too. My dad used to love pig's feet, but I used to be very grossed out by them. But come to find out, if you put them in the broth, it's enormously nutritious with the collagen. Anyway, I'm adding garlic, keeping the skins on as well for flavor. Once you've added all of that, pretty simple. You add 2 teaspoons or tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Most bone broths have, I think for flavor, bay leaf, some parsley. I'll add a couple teaspoons of this in there. I'll add peppercorns. You can crush them up a little bit. I add about a tablespoon of peppercorns. I don't add salt until the end, and the reason is because when this cooks down, you don't want it to be so concentrated at the end that it's too salty. So I always salt it at the end. What else do I have here? Oh, I add some rosemary and definitely thyme. I think thyme, bay leaf, and parsley is a must. And then you just adjust it for whatever flavor you like. Some people don't Mother doesn't like rosemary, so I don't put it in when she's around. But anyway, so I put those in, salt it at the end. Now, depending on what kind of bones you have in here, it's going to depend on how long you cook it. And I'll say this as well, that bone broth in general, you not only get the benefits from the minerals and the collagen from it, but you also there are some amino acids that there's a lot of amino acids, but there are 4 big ones. There's proline, I think it's arginine, glycine, but glutamine is the one that gets the most attention. And the reason why is because it's extremely gut healing. Our gut cells or the cells in our gut turn over really rapidly, and they actually prefer glutamine over any other amino acid. So when we're drinking this every day or consuming it in whatever form you like, you're feeding your gut cells, and it's extremely nourishing for them. Now, I will say that glutamine in general, if you've heard of monosodium glutamate or MSG, it's quite a controversial substance. It's been around for about 100 years, and it comes in numerous forms. And some people cannot tolerate glutamine or glutamate, free glutamate. The longer you boil the bones, the more free glutamate comes out of the bones. So there are certain subset of population that can't tolerate glutamate, and even autistic children have a problem with glutamate. Many do. And for those individuals, my recommendation would be you boil it maybe only an hour or two, so you don't create as much free glutamate in the broth. And you also put more meat in it and less bones. The meat's going to give it flavor, and the bones is where all of that glutamate comes. And then you slowly, progressively move. An autistic child that we've put on or frequently recommended the GAPS diet, which has actually been very successful with a lot of autistic children. However, it's sort of contradictory, because you're thinking, well, you're giving these children glutamate because bone broth is a huge component of this diet. But you start off really slowly. You start off with, as I said, you just boil it for an hour or so, and then you move into the more traditional broths where you're boiling it more for 4 to 6 hours or 8 hours. Chicken and turkey, you boil for maybe 4 to 6 hours. It's all on the sheet that I have provided. Fish, you don't need to boil as long, for maybe 1 or 2 hours. Beef, you can go overnight, 24 hours, to really extract all the good stuff out of those bones in the marrow.
And that goes for leaky gut in general. You hear this term bandied around about your gut dysfunction. It doesn't matter what disease you have. If you have a leaky gut, you do not want to start with a full brew. You want to start at the 1 to 2 hour while you're doing your elimination of the foods that are triggers until you heal the gut, and then you can start progressing into the longer and longer brews and get more glutamine, and then it's actually helpful at that point because your gut's not leaking.
Yeah, and you might have heard of many glutamine supplements, because once again, we like to extract the good things that we think are good out of foods, and then we like to put them in a supplement form and say, here, take this, and you're going to heal your gut, and you're going to heal this and heal that. But once again, it's the synergistic properties of what we're creating here, like with everything here. You can take a probiotic supplement, but like Chris was saying, you think about the billions of colonies you're getting on top of the fermented foods. I'll also say this. I forgot to say that by creating this broth, it also helps the digestibility of meats and legumes and beans and grains. So if you're making, let's say, a beef barley soup, well, guess what? Barley you may not be able to tolerate even the barley grain. But if you make it with the soup, it's going to help it digest those proteins and help you digest them better. Same thing goes for beans. Same thing goes for the meat. So it makes sense if you're making split pea soup with a ham hock. There's a reason for that ham hock. It's to help digest and break down those peas so that you can better absorb the nutrients that are in them. So there's really a purpose for everything. What? Is it ready? It's ready. Okay.
As you can tell, who makes the ghee?
Okay.
So anyone want to drink casein?
Yeah, so you see it looks it's all cloudy and thick and sort of yucky. And then this, if you can see it, is see how it's translucent. You can see right through it. Everybody see that? Yeah. So now you know it's ready. And if you let it go a little bit longer, it even gets like this nice hue, this little orangish hue. So now we very carefully strain this. Yeah, you can if you're not bothered by it. You can reuse it for other things if you want, but the whole purpose is sort of to get rid of that irritating
We give it to
protein. It solidifies, a little bit. We keep ours on the counter. I mean, this can keep up to a year, I've read, so on the counter. I mean, it's quite shelf stable. Yeah. Yes.
All the time. Unless they have a whey protein sensitivity.
Yeah. Depends on what's going on.
And that's very rare.
Okay. So bone broth. It does. Once it cools, it'll get it won't get hard, but it'll get more solidified. Yeah.
It's kind of like yellow Crisco.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I'm making eggs, I'll put some of that in there, and I'll even put it on, some bread or what, just like you would use a butter or anything.
Yeah,
the great thing about ghee now is that I don't know if you ever cook with butter, but it burns so easily when you cook with it, and that's why you can combine it with some olive oil, and then it can raise the temperature of your cooking, whatever you're cooking. The great thing about ghee is that it has a really high smoke point, so you can do high heat cooking with that, and that's the beauty. I love cooking with ghee. I pretty much cook either with ghee, coconut oil, or olive oil on very low temperatures.
And understanding again that fats are good for us. If you talk about a ketogenic diet, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a ketogenic diet. It's a diet that originally was thought of for kids with intractable seizures. We give them 3, 6, 7 different medicines and nothing stops their seizures. You put them on a ketogenic diet, which means they have no sugar. They have no glucose in their diet. So what happens is the body then says, I'm going to break down fats and produce ketones. And those ketones actually cross into the brain, and that's used as a major fuel source for the brain. It actually is neuroprotective. There's actually very good research looking into ketone states of ketone in your blood as a health property. And so lots of folks will actually put ghee, coconut oil, and different things in their diet. So example, people put that in their coffee, and periodically I actually will take coffee, put a teaspoon of ghee, put a teaspoon of coconut oil, add some cinnamon, add some other stuff, and down the hatch. And tastes delicious. And you're getting things that your body really wants. It sounds a little crazy, but it's actually really good.
There's a company that makes a product called coconut ghee, which is a mixture of coconut oil and grass-fed cows. Pretty awesome, actually. You use that to cover your cooking needs, your coffee needs. And I put coconut ghee in my coffee.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought.
Coconut ghee.
A farmer in Nebraska, actually. The coconut ghee, you buy it, it's actually by the gallon. It's good stuff. It's from grass-fed cows.
And so you see the common theme here in everything we're making really is gut healing. Because the biggest problem with modern America, and frankly all modern societies right now, is gut dysfunction. And that gut dysfunction is primarily an issue with bad bugs. For those of you who've heard our lectures before, there's many different ways to mess up your gut. The most important way and the most dangerous one is American-style diet. Flour, sugar, and poor quality fats. Those are the ones that are really messing us up. Then other things that really mess us up is being born by C-section. All children who are born by C-section have an increased risk of disease because they're getting exposed to the wrong bacteria from the skin instead of the bacteria that you normally get from the vagina. Then if they don't breastfeed, they're not getting good bugs from the mom's breast. Instead, again, they're getting bugs that are related to the nipple, which is, again, skin bugs, and then bugs that are related to the cow's milk. And for anyone who doesn't know this, little kids are not little baby cows. I mean, so we shouldn't be doing that, but yet we still do this. And now there's independent evidence that each one of these mistakes is causing problems to our gut. And then the final and biggest nightmare actually has been the modern use of antibiotics. One of the greatest inventions of all time is becoming one of our greatest curses. And the overuse of antibiotics for the last 40 years between husbandry and animal farms that figured out a long time ago that if you give a cow, when they're very young, feed that has antibiotics in it, they'll grow longer. And why do they grow bigger? Why do they grow bigger? Because you're altering the gut flora, and those gut flora become then abnormal, and they make them gain weight. Very similar to what you see in modern American populations. The abnormal gut microbiome is dysfunctionally making us get fatter and unfortunately less healthy. And so that combination is what I call the recipe for disaster. And then there's other things in there too, but If you've been born by C-section, you're given lots of antibiotics, you weren't breastfed, you're in trouble.
That's where, go ahead. Oh, I'm back on now. So, but yeah, there's the fat pill is what antibiotics do. The way it disturbs your gut flora, lets the bad guys take over and influences the way you burn fat, carbohydrates, and proteins, basically.
So what do you have in there?
Yeah, what are you doing over there?
Okay.
You've been doing a lot of stuff, and nobody knows what's going on.
I know. Well, see, the real deal is I'm making my sauerkraut now, and I'm really just cutting all this stuff up for show. You can just use a food processor and you'd be done in 5 minutes. You know, bzz, 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 bzz.
Yeah, but that's boring.
Yeah. So sauerkraut is basically just, I mean, it's fermented cabbage, and you know, a lot of times when you're getting into doing things like this, geez, what's the recipe? What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Do whatever you want. Experiment. And what I have right here is garlic, two cloves, 2 heads of garlic, carrots, ginger, red onions, green and purple cabbage, basically. And there's 3 ways to basically get this to ferment or to make probiotics. One way is what's called wild fermentation. All of this produce has bugs on it. So you can just cut it all up, and what you're going to see me do in a minute is just smash it up with my hands. Now, if you do use a food processor, you don't even have to smash it up with your hands because it liquefies it, basically. So there's wild fermentation, which you just stuff it into a jar tight. And what I use is what's called a perfect pickler. Basically, it's an airlock lid. They sell these at Simply Good if anyone's interested in doing this. But the fermentation process releases gas, so that gas has to be released. You fill this little thing with water, and you'll see me packing this stuff in when I do. But a perfect pickler. You could easily, just as well use a little upside-down coffee filter. So you throw all your vegetables in, again, whatever you want. If you want to make kimchi, use a lot of red pepper. I once bought some cute orange peppers at Harris Teeter. I didn't know what they were. I'll throw some peppers in. Yeah, they were habaneros. So I learned something with that particular batch. I just thought they were cute little orange peppers. So, and what you do after you put all your vegetables in a bowl, you salt them pretty heavily, because what salt does is it brings the water out, kills any of the bad bacteria, and it's part of the fermentation process. So the 2 salts I recommend generally are Celtic sea salt or Himalayan salt. So I mentioned there's three ways to seed this. Wild fermentation, where you seed it with whatever's on it. You can make your own whey, and what I've done here is, I took this lap from someone's surgery. They didn't need it. They didn't need it to sop up any blood, but it's basically cheesecloth. So you put some yogurt in a little cheesecloth, hang it down, and you can see there's fluid dripping down here. That's whey. And so what I can do is use this whey and pour it in there, and so that will inoculate it with lactobacilli, which is one of the good probiotics that you want. So you can inoculate it with whey. If you do wild fermentation and you don't inoculate it with anything, it takes a little longer to start the fermentation process. Or the other option is to use a starter, basically. This is kinetic culture, and this one has particular bacteria that produce higher amounts of vitamin K. I'm a huge vitamin K fan, vitamin K2. So this is a starter that I bought. There's different companies that make starters, but so I sprinkle some of this in, and I use salt. I started out mostly just using whey. Just take any yogurt you have in the refrigerator, put it in a cheesecloth, let it hang down, and then you have cheese here up top too that you can eat afterwards if you want. So I'll sprinkle a little bit of this starter on here, and what you'll see me doing next basically is just squeezing the heck out of this to get the juices flowing, and following that, I'll just pack it all into this jar, and when this is full, I will sit it onto my counter for 10, 14, 30 days, whatever. It doesn't really matter as long as you create a fluid level that the vegetables can stay under, and the way you create that fluid level, you pack it tight. I brought a little thing to jam it in there, and I'll show you how this works once I actually do it. But that's how they used to store food before they had refrigerators. And the reason it doesn't rot is because the pH and the good bacteria that are in there prevent the bad bacteria from taking over. If you just put this on the counter without having the vegetable
eat. So I think, and if fruits and vegetables, you can go to Environmental Working Group, EWG.com or .org, and they have the Dirty Dozen. They list the top 12 fruits and vegetables that have the most pesticides on them, and you can avoid those, and the rest, they'll have the Clean 15. So that's a good resource.
And there's actually an app you can just throw on your smartphone that when you walk into the grocery store, and I don't have them memorized, I know certain things, green leafy things are always loaded with pesticide, and then strawberries, blueberries, apples, pears, those are always nightmares too. A lot of the other ones, you just have to look on the list, but your bang for your buck, meat, no question. I would agree entirely. And then after there, just go down the line and buy whatever you can. But, on a limited budget, remember that the best way to eat is predominantly vegetables and fruits. So if you just cut back on your meat, the amount of money you're going to save that you can now throw towards organic vegetables is ridiculous. And if you go look at most people's grocery carts, it's loaded with high-priced proteins. Just cut back on the high-priced proteins, and you found a nice budget for organic foods.
Yeah. This is an interesting question that seems to always come up. If you have a milk allergy, can lactate meds or milk help? And I think there's a big misconception between what an allergy is and intolerance is. So if you are lactose intolerant, that means you don't have the lactase enzyme to break down lactose, which is the carbohydrate portion of milk. If you have a allergy, a dairy allergy, you're allergic to the protein casein, which is what we were doing here, in dairy. So there's a big difference there. So no, lactose or lactose-free milk wouldn't probably help. But there are so many people that when they drink milk have upset stomachs. And I always say to people, well, that I first think of lactose intolerance just because there's more lactose in milk and ice cream versus butter. So a lot of people will feel that reaction from a milk or an ice cream before they'll feel it from just eating butter. That makes sense.
Yeah, and remember there's the third category too is the milk protein intolerance. So you have the milk allergy, which is milk touches your tongue, swelling, vomiting, anaphylaxis, death. That's the bad one. Then you have milk protein intolerance, which is the one where the babies get it and they have the colic and the green poops and all that stuff. That's a protein reaction. And then the category, which is the sugar. And so people often get those interspersed. And lactate, which is what people talk about, is that only works for lactase enzyme deficiency or lactose intolerance. And frankly, most Caucasians have plenty of lactase up until about age 40. And then it depends on your culture. If you're African American, usually by age 20, lactase enzyme starts to really decrease. So that's a much faster onset of lactose intolerance. Caucasians generally don't end up in lactose intolerance. If you're having issues with milk, it's probably milk protein intolerance. And one of the things you can look for is if you feel your skin on the outsides of your arms and the outsides of your legs, it's like chicken skin. It doesn't itch, doesn't bug you. That's generally a food sensitivity reaction called keratosis pilaris. And that's a first window into you've got leaky gut issues, and dairy is the first thing I'm yanking out of my kids when I see them. What? Milk protein intolerance? Everything happens as you age. So, it's a functional reality.
All goes to heck. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a functional reality as we age, we are more burdened by toxin exposure. We're more burdened by exposure to antibiotics. We're more burdened by all of these things that mess up our gut, our immune system, all of these things. And so, yes, the answer is everything gets worse as you age. And the only way to mitigate that is to do all the things we're talking about to reverse the aging process. And there's some actually fantastic research looking at anti-aging. He's an expert, and I'm the early anti-aging. Till age 25, then you're done.
Yeah. I'm going to show just a quick, I know it's getting late, so I'm just going to show you a quick little drink that I love. I think this is so warm and cozy and warm on a cold winter now, basically. Well, I guess it's not that cold, but it was for a little bit. This, how many people are coffee drinkers in here?
Wow.
Almost everybody. Well, if you like, do you like tea? Anybody like tea? Okay. Matcha, we talked about that a little bit a couple of weeks ago. The difference between matcha is green tea that the difference between matcha is in regular green tea that you would steep is matcha. You actually eat the actual leaf of the plant of the tea. So you can buy it in powdered forms, but it's best to buy Japanese matcha. Do not buy Chinese matcha or anything from China because there's a concern about the contamination of their soils and heavy metals in them. So make sure when you look, and there are many on there that are from China, so make sure you do look at that. This one's from Republic of Tea, but there's many others out there that you can buy. Matcha is off the scale on the ORAC value of antioxidants. Whoops. When you compare it to like a blueberry that I think is somewhere around 80, this has something like 13 or 1500. I mean, it's the antioxidant capacity, something called catechins in here, a substance known as ECGC that's very, very powerful and very health promoting. It has a little bit of caffeine. It has probably, I mean, it depends on the dose, obviously, but the standard 8-ounce cup probably has around 70 milligrams, where a cup of coffee has somewhere around 120 milligrams. So you're getting caffeine if you need that caffeine dose. The traditional way to drink this is you take a teaspoon of it, put it in a cup, boil some hot water over it, 6 to 8 ounces of hot water, and you froth it. The traditional method is to take a wooden frother. I use this little fun contraption, my frother. I love this thing. And that's it. You froth it and you can drink it. Now, some people think he does not care for it. Do you like matcha?
No, I don't really drink matcha.
Yeah, well, it's some people think it tastes like grass. I wish I brought my, I don't think it tastes like grass. It's very earthy, but I combine it actually with coconut milk. So what I'll do is I'll take this, I'll mix it with hot water, about 6 ounces of hot water or even 4 ounces, and I'll froth it. And then on the stove, this takes like 30 seconds to do. On the stove, I'll take coconut milk. Now you can buy full fat or you can buy the light as well. It's it has less, it's less, not as high octane as this, but again, the fat is healthy. It's lauric acid. It's a medium chain fat. Coconut is very, very healthy for you. I take, can I have those spoons, please? Thank you. I will take, this is turmeric, which Dr. Nagy has explained thoroughly. One of the most powerful antioxidants out there. I put about a quarter of a teaspoon. What I've done in here is I've just heated the milk. This is my little milk heater. Then I'll take about another fourth of a teaspoon. I have 8 ounces of coconut milk, a quarter of a teaspoon of turmeric, a quarter of a teaspoon of cinnamon. I take a little vanilla. You can use vanilla bean. But again, I'll put a little bit, maybe another fourth of a teaspoon of vanilla in there. Cinnamon, another great antioxidant, antibacterial, great for blood sugar control. What else do I have here? Oh, and then I take my little peppercorns, because as we were talking about earlier, we were talking about the pepper and the turmeric and helping the absorption. So I'll take, you can either take peppercorns and I let them sort of steep in there with the milk, or I'll just take actual pepper and I'll just throw just a dash in there with it. You can't taste it. It just helps with the absorption. And then,
honey.
What?
Honey?
Yeah, you can, and then you can add a sweetener. I use Manuka honey, or I'll use just raw local honey. I froth it. This really just mixes all of the spices in. And then once this is mixed, I'll take my matcha that I had made with the hot water, and I pour this over the matcha, and it's a green tea latte. If you don't like matcha, you can just drink it like this.
Or coffee.
Or you can pour it over. Yeah, I've done that before. I've poured it over like an espresso shot, and you can make your own lattes with this.
I've stolen it many times.
He has.
Or
if you just want a warm drink, like for my kids, they want, instead of drinking that sugared, just awful concoctions of cocoa that are out there for kids these days, and I've looked at just about every single one of them. This is a great alternative, and it has the sweetness of the cinnamon, the turmeric, and the coconut milk. Now, you can add a little bit of honey if you want to give it, but I think this is sweet enough for me, but some people like a little bit extra, so I'll add, you can add like another maybe quarter of a teaspoon to taste. I have little sample cups if anyone wants to taste it.
Speaking of beverages,
That's it.
I can share mine here now.
Yeah.
Another thing on the fermented vegetables, to some that may seem a little gross. He was putting his hands in there, and I kind of think of that as my signature of the fermented veggies I make, because it's got my microbiome on it now. All the little bacteria. There's not really just a microbiome in your gut. There's a microbiome on your skin. At the last meeting I shared at the end, I hadn't washed my face for 4 weeks now. It's been 6 now. I'm using this stuff called Mother Dirt, which is actually Nitrosomonas euphora. It's a spray that you use. Some people say, you can not have to take a shower, just spray this bacteria on you. It's what's called an ammonium oxidizing bacteria.
Hey, we got to get some of that for Thomas.
No showers. Yeah, you just spray yourself. So, I read about that. This is out of Boston, and a guy's girlfriend asked him, why do horses always roll around in the dirt after they've been sweating or they've worked hard? And started looking into it, and it turns out that's a good way that they get their ammonia oxidizing bacteria. So from that, they've created a company, to nourish the skin microbiome, because we kill our skin microbiome every day we step in the shower. Sodium lauryl sulfate, a lot of the phosphates, some of the things that are in our personal care products. So I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a try. So it's been 6 weeks now since I've actually washed my face with soap and water, and just a little mist you spray on. Mother Dirt, kind of interesting. But talking about liquids, this is kombucha, and kombucha is basically fermented tea. Just like we have the fermented milk for the kefir, the kombucha relies on what's called, this is another SCOBY. That's a symbiotic colony of yeast and bacteria. And so what you do is make 1 gallon of sweet tea a week. And basically, once it cools off, of course, you've poured this off already. This is a secondary ferment of kombucha, basically. So, and it's naturally effervescent because of the fermentation process. If you ever buy kombucha at the store, you got to be careful opening it, because it'll blow. But anyways, you make a gallon of sweet tea, and the reason sweet tea is because the bacteria and the yeast need the sugar to ferment. So the sugar is not for you, and it's not equivalent to sweet tea. The sugar is for the bacteria in this SCOBY up top here. So it ferments that, it eats through that, it makes alcohol. They're even thinking about taking that kombucha off the shelf because it's a very mild form of alcohol. A couple years ago, they did take it off the shelf because it had a 0.5% alcohol in it. So they've clamped down on the kombucha manufacturers a little bit. But anyways, you ferment this for a week, 7-10 days. The more you ferment it, if you ferment it too long, it becomes vinegar, basically. So you don't want it to be too sour. And what I'll often do is I pour the kombucha out of here into a separate bottle, and what I'll do is stuff these Grolsch-type bottles with some ginger, some blackberries, some blueberries, and unfortunately my wife once found out what happens if you don't burp these bottles every once in a while, because she called me one morning. I'm in the middle of clinic seeing patients. It's 10:30, and I had stuck these bottles in our dining room, kind of under the little cabinet, and it was blackberry ginger.
Sort of like not changing a diaper.
It exploded. It exploded. She's like, I can't believe. Can you get home right now and clean this up? I'm seeing patients right now, so, and then I'll let it secondarily ferment. And you could buy different forms of kombucha, ginger, blueberry, but you secondarily ferment it with a fruit or an herb, and that makes it even a healthier drink. Kombucha actually is growing as far as drink sales are concerned. If you look at the national market, people are getting more interested. They're getting away from soda and trying to consume something that's healthy. And kombucha does have probiotics in it, but what it also has is what are called organic acids. Acetic acid, which is found in vinegar. Organic acids are very healthy for detoxification, for the liver, and not something that we drink a lot of. I'm a huge fan of apple cider vinegar. A tablespoon or two before meals helps regulate your insulin sensitivity, helps digest your food, does a lot of many positive things. So kombucha is very, very easy to make too. All you need to do is find a friend who can give you a SCOBY. And what happens with these SCOBYs, just like the Kefir grains, they grow and grow and grow, and you just rip a piece off and give it to a friend, actually, and then they can start their own kombucha culture.
So I got a question here. What is the best way to prepare a woman's body for delivery, i.e. getting ready just in case you have a C-section, something along those lines, and then what to do after delivery? It's actually an interesting question. A good friend of mine named Liz Mumper, she's a pediatrician up in Lynchburg, Virginia, has done a study that unfortunately, as always, got a lot of scorn from the medical community because she's doing something outside the box. And so she's been looking at sets of mothers that go through her clinic that she puts on a program of all organic diet, no exposure to drugs and chemicals if at all possible, and then making sure they're getting adequate sleep, all these basic things. And she is now into 280 straight births, making it to age 2 without autism. And so it's a pretty interesting philosophy. And so for me, when I hear this question, the number one thing I tell mothers in my clinic is avoid chemicals at all costs. Because while you're pregnant, that is such a critical time where chemicals can actually get in the bloodstream and do damage to a fetus. There's good data now. Autism is a multifactorial disease. It's a syndrome, basically, and there's thousands of different genes that are showing up. And one trigger for autism is being shown as high fever. And so if a mother gets a really high fever during pregnancy, there's a risk of a major problem to the child, and it's usually in the first or second trimester. And so, trying to avoid getting sick. Well, again, how do you avoid getting sick? Well, you take, effective diet, probiotics, adequate sleep. The Native Americans in the old days used to cordon off the pregnant women and keep them basically stress-free, knowing that that's the best way to allow mom to make it all the way to the end without a bad outcome. And so, essentially, good diet. It's all the same stuff for building your immunity, getting adequate sleep, avoiding chemicals and drugs at all costs, exercising. Pregnant women can exercise all the way up until, we have an OB in the room, so he can answer the question, but in general, I've always heard up to, 8 months, even up to the end. And so just go and work out and get in great shape. But, for me, number 1, 2, 3, and 4 is avoid chemicals.
The 10 American study, I think it was the Environmental Working Group that did it. They tested cord blood in pregnant mothers. I think 429 chemicals they tested for. And they found 287 chemicals in the pregnant mother's cord blood.
Yeah, the baby's blood.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and doses, when they looked at that study, actually, they were doses equivalent to taking 1 Paxil. If you had a drug, as a child, I basically had a dose equivalent of 1 Paxil in his bloodstream. These are things that are going to mess us up. So that's my best advice on that one.
I have a question I didn't answer.
Yeah.
The kefir question was the liquid following straining the kefir, was that kefir, or was it kefir after adding the yogurt? It was kefir as soon as it was strained. Adding the yogurt was just for my tastes. But the kefir is just the liquid that's drained off after you separate from the grains.
And also a question, where do you get the starter kit for kefir and kombucha?
Well, somebody generously donated 5 things of kefir grains tonight. So if anybody's hardcore and they really want to do this, I've got 5 things of kefir grains. But culturesforhealth.com, you can buy kefir grains from them. Or you can buy a kefir powder. It's simply good, but again, that won't last you indefinitely. You basically get kefir grains from a friend or someone who shares, or Cultures for Health.
Yep.
Yeah. As long as they're fed. If you're going to go out of town, what I do when I'm going to be away, I'll just leave it in the fridge the whole time, and sometimes it fully ferments while it's in the fridge, if I'm gone long enough. I just noticed as I looked over here, you can see this now. I just messed it up. It's separating in the curds and whey. It was all clear on the bottom, and basically just shake it up. But the kefir grains will stay alive as long as you feed them. If you keep them in the refrigerator for 3 months and don't give them new milk, which is lactose, the kefir uses the milk, sugar, lactose, they'll die eventually. But it's just a matter of keeping them fed. And so I fill up my mason jar, put it in the fridge, and I've gone 2 weeks without using it. But if you leave it too long, it still ferments in the fridge, just slower.
Okay, I'm going to try and do like a power round here
Sure,
so we can
sure.
get through some of these. Okay, so someone asked, can you simmer this bone broth in a crock pot or over the stove? You can do either one. Same, either one. Doesn't matter. Is almond milk good?
Homemade almond milk.
Yes, thank you. The almond milk that you get in the store is you're getting like 2 almonds, in the whole thing. It's fine if you want to drink. I have no problem as long as you're getting the unsweetened kind. It's basically water with like 2 almonds and a little bit of fortification. So it's not bad. It's just you're paying a lot of money for something that's not really Nutritional. When you can make your own at home is much better. I like cashew milk, and I make my own at home, and it's so simple to make. You soak the cashews overnight. You throw them in a cup of them in a blender with 4 cups of water. You add a little bit of vanilla.
Strain them before you put them in
No,
the blender.
I don't strain. You don't have to strain cashews. You strain almonds. Anyway, but that's what's great about the cashews. You can eat the cashew. You eat the nuts, and you're getting all that nutrition. I add some dates, a couple of dates to the whole mixture, just to add a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of salt, and that's it. And it'll last for 4 or 5 days, and it's delicious. So that's that.
And just one addition to that, is almond milk good? I think in general, monotonicity is never good. And so just like a monoculture farm is a bad idea, because then you have to use pesticides to control stuff, a biodiversity or a food diversity is always better. So alternating between almond milk, rice milk, coconut milk, organic soy milk, that makes more sense to me than drinking almond milk every day. And the other thing that's fascinating, if you are leaky gut or developing a leaky gut, it's the food that you eat all the time that's going to be the first one that generally runs into trouble. So varying your diet is
so if you're like a cheese
important.
lover, it's probably the cheese that's screwing you up, most likely, unfortunately. And it's hard. But that's oftentimes what it is. Is Miralax safe for kids? Yes, I can answer that. Toddlers, suggestions for constipation.
Go
ahead.
I first and foremost, constipation is real simple. 70% of kids that are constipated is dairy. Studied, tested, proven, done. So first thing I do with every constipated kid, and again, this depends on how long they've been constipated for. If you've been constipated for 3 years, your intestine has now dilated like an anaconda that just ate an alligator. And I've seen a picture of an anaconda eating an alligator. That anaconda's not moving for a while. Well, same thing happens to your poop. It doesn't move for a while. And the bad thing about your colon is when your colon doesn't move for a while, it sucks water out. So the poop gets harder. So eventually when that thing does pass, it's usually a football, and it tears the child on the way out, so they scream, they're not going to poop again. So you get this vicious cycle. So number one, first thing is cut dairy out. If that's not curing the problem, you probably have what's called acquired megacolon. You have the anaconda. And so then you got to think about adding in some other product to allow the gut to hold on to water. And one of the things we do use is something called Ready, Set, Go, which is a combination of senna, which is basically it irritates the gut to move. It's got osmotic things in it like prunes and different stuff like that. Miralax is polyethylene glycol. It's a big chemical, right? There's no data that it's dangerous yet. And again, I can't answer that with any certainty yet. It's a sugar that basically, if you put it in the alimentary canal, it comes out the other side. And what it does, it holds onto water because it's osmotic. So in the process of doing that, it forces water into the colon, which then makes the poop softer, then the kid can go to the bathroom. So I do use Miralax, but only in very short periods of time to get a child to poop again naturally, right? But the bottom line is, in general, you want to do it by diet. And then the other thing that's really important for going to the bathroom is fiber. You want lots of fiber, and that fiber actually helps your gut microbiome, so it's got a double-edged benefit. So I encourage tons of vegetables, tons of fruits, and anytime a parent tells me their kid won't eat it, I tell them you're not parenting. And they're mad at me, and they walk out, and they go talk to one of my partners, and it's fine with me. I'm okay with that.
I also have a really good constipation potion concoction that I will have on my website that you can go, and it's just a recipe you can make at home, and you can give your child a tablespoon or two a day, and it will help keep them regular. And it's a combination of things like applesauce and prunes and things like that. You blend it up in a blender, and it's a consistency of applesauce, but it's very helpful with constipation.
Are we out of time? Where's John?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there nutritional solutions to postmenopausal hot flashes? And yes, there are. If you want to avoid postmenopausal hot flashes, the important thing is to control your insulin levels. Hot flashes are highly associated with elevated insulin levels. What drives high insulin levels is excess carbohydrate consumption. Now, if you're looking for plant and nutritional things, a decent product which is available is called Estrovera, which is made from Siberian rhubarb. It's made by the company Metagenics. You can look it up on Amazon. But Estrovera is plant-based supplement that you can take for hot flashes. But really, if you want to control hot flashes, one of the most important things you can do is control your insulin levels. That which is to restrict your carbohydrates, a low carbohydrate type diet. That's the main nutritional recommendation for hot flashes.
There's one more here that says, what's safe for babies, toddlers, basically to eat, to add good bacteria to their diet? Are all of these things safe for them? And the answer is yes. The only things I wouldn't let a child have under the age of 1 is honey, because of the risk of botulism, and raw fish or raw meats. In general, every other food is very safe, and I don't recommend feeding a child before the 6-month age. They should be nourished only with breast milk until 6 months, and then after that we can talk about food. And they should not be white foods. It should be real food. It should be whole food. It should be, avocados or sweet potatoes or something healthy. If you're giving your kid rice cereal as the first food they're giving, you might as well just teach them how to be a sugarholic, and that's just not a good idea.
I brought a couple books, too. We talked about books last time. We talked about Sally Fallon's books. Anybody who's really interested in fermentation, The Art of Fermentation by Sandor Katz. I posted a little video of his on my timeline today. This is actually a guy who's HIV positive. And, what can I do? How can I heal myself? I think HIV positive since the 90s. And he got into fermentation. He's kind of like the godfather of fermentation now. But The Art of Fermentation by Sandor Katz. People that want to learn a little bit about a whole foods-based diet, Practical Paleo by Diane Sanfilippo is a good book. And people that want the nuts and bolts, Eat Bacon, Don't Jog. It's really quite a good little book. It's quick and easy, and it talks basically a lot about what we've been talking about here, healthy fat diet, but it also incorporates exercise, stress reduction, supplements, Eat Bacon, Don't Jog. It's a pretty good...
and then here are the other two Sally Fallon books, again, Nourishing Broth and Nourishing Traditions.
So,
good.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Oh, thank you, yeah.